television and watch them sort through our private lives like laundry. Those vultures. I mean, of all the days for Tiffany to be covering another story, at least if she'd been there, she would have been somewhat discreet.
They were simply doing a job, dear.
And we have enough to handle without worrying about the press.
Edward's right. Oh, of course, I appreciated Alan's filial response to that arrogant young reporter, but I'm afraid it only added fuel to their fire. The situation will require all the dignity and self-control that this family can muster.
Well, we'll take our cue from you, Lila.
Oh, my dear. If we can only match your recent example, we'd be well ahead of the game. Are you feeling better, darling?
Well, actually, I've been so caught up in the television coverage that I forgot to be miserable. I just don't see that it was necessary to have everything come out in court like that. I mean, without any warning.
I'm sure Mary Mae didn't want it that way either. But she saw how things were going for grandfather. She made a split-second decision. Now he'll probably be acquitted.
Are you sure that you wouldn't like to go upstairs and rest a while before our guests arrive?
Actually, I'd like a few moments with you alone.
Well, I best tell Reginald that we're going to have company. I guess I better fill him in on everything. In case he should drop a plate of hors d'oeuvres if Justice calls you Gramps.
It's not likely, Mom.
Come on now, don't lose a sense of humor. We need that to get us through this. This and maybe a lot more. We'll be in the living room if you need us. Come on, darling.
I hope to God that reporter doesn't press charges against Alan.
Oh, I'm sure Lee will smooth it over. I'm glad Ned and AJ stayed behind with them. It gives us a few moments to sort things out.
I heard somebody say that you didn't seem surprised in court. Had you guessed the truth?
Not guessed exactly. Felt.
You know, when I enlisted and was sent to OCS after Pearl Harbor, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. None of us did, really. It all just seemed so glamorous, the patriotism and the flag waving and those uniforms.
I remember. I wasn't immune either. That's when we became engaged.
It didn't take long for me to become disillusioned.
But your letters were so upbeat.
Well, I guess I naively wanted to protect you from reality. You had fallen in love with a gallant young officer. I had to maintain my image. I was afraid to admit that I was scared to death and wanted to run. And I was afraid I would run when the time came.
But you could tell her.
Well, she'd already been there. I remember when I first heard her sing in that dingy little jazz club outside Norfolk. There was nothing very glamorous about it. No pretensions. Underneath my uniform and her evening dress, we were just a couple of scared kids.
No, Edward. You may have been a kid, but I would guess that she was already a woman. That was the difference. And I was still a girl, even though I was older than she was in terms of years.
Well, it was the war. Oh, no, I can't blame the war. That's too easy.
Oh, blame is pointless. There's only understanding.
I'm not sure I ever understood when it comes to my relationship with Mary Mae.
Perhaps I can help you now.
We've put up a lot during our life together. It's hard to ignore my weaknesses when so many of them have shown up on your doorstep.
This is different.
Exactly. And you do understand. I don't know why that should surprise me. The smartest thing I ever did was to marry you.
True.
From the moment I first saw you, I knew that you were the woman I wanted as my life's partner.
Tell me about Mary Mae Ward. Was she a very good singer?
I remember my first impression of her. Somebody had mentioned the club, and I had nothing to do that evening. And she was in the middle of a number when I arrived. Her voice was as smoky as the room. She looked much older. And she sang with the wisdom of ages.
You have to know about life to sing the blues. Did you think I only appreciated opera?
I wish you could have heard her.
How did she come to be widowed so young?
Her first husband was drowned when his destroyer sank in the South Pacific. He'd been a musician before the war, and all she had left was music. And she used it the way people use drugs, to dull the pain and the loneliness and the fear. I was feeling pretty lonely and afraid, too, then, waiting to be shipped out, not knowing whether I'd come back alive or whole. I couldn't get enough of her voice. I went back night after night.
You recognized a kindred soul.
You sure you want to hear this?
I was thinking how selfish and unaware I was at home in New York, writing you silly letters about rations and how hard it was to buy a decent hat.
I lived for those letters.
But you needed something more.
I never thought of it as being unfaithful to you. My friendship with Mary Mae grew out of our common interests and our differences. I was fascinated by her stories of touring through the segregated South and the history of her family. And I realized that I had never had a black friend before to give me that perspective. Then friends became lovers in what seemed a very logical and natural progression. And it wasn't so much passion as it was comfort. Shortly after that, I received my orders, and we said goodbye. And that would have been that. Except that a child was conceived. You heard about the letter that she wrote me, and I wrote her back saying that I would do whatever I could to help. But I never heard from her again or saw her until the night that Bradley Ward died. I swear. I feel as if there's something that you want me to say that I'm not saying.
I was thinking of the forces which gave Bradley Ward life. Compassion, creativity, courage. No wonder he was such a remarkable man.
And I never had the opportunity to acknowledge him to his face. I had no idea until Mary Mae came to me with that letter. And the next day, he was dead. And I never knew him. And he never knew me. Except as an adversary. And I should have told you this 20 years ago.
You told me now.
Mrs. Ward and Justice Ward.
What can I get you to drink?
Is that tea?
Do you take lemon or milk and sugar?
I take it plain, thank you. Justice?
No, thank
But
you.
maybe Justice would like something stronger.
Nothing, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reginald. That'll be all. Mrs. Ward, I'd like to tell you how very much I admire the courage it must have taken to stand up in that courtroom and acknowledge Edward as your son's father.
I'm sorry it had to come out the way it did. I know that is not what your husband wanted, but I sensed that things were going badly for him. I felt the truth would serve him.
I hope it will serve us all.
If I'd come forward with the truth 20 years ago, if I had just had more faith in the enduring quality of Bradley's work, the man that murdered my son would not have walked free all these years.
Doing business with me and claiming friendship?
It's time to put our mistakes behind us.
That's exactly what Schultz was trying to convince the jury that I did 20 years ago by murdering my own son.
Edward, Mrs. Ward will think you're ungrateful.
Not at all. You couldn't know that the district attorney would twist your words. Well, surely the jury won't believe that I'm such a monster.
If you were, I'd know.
And that's what Mr. Stannis told them. We are very grateful to you, Mrs. Ward.
Yes. Yes, of course.
I hope you won't think this is presumptuous, but I wish I'd known your son, Bradley.
No, I don't think it's presumptuous, and I wish he had known you as more than an adversary.
Oh, damn it, yes, all those months of bitter confrontations over the airport. If I had known...
You would still have been on opposite sides.
Perhaps.
No, no. It would have been different. I know that now. You would have seen to it, just as you saw to it that the investigation was terminated, as I asked. Just as you've made a difference at the Bradley Ward house these years, those very generous, anonymous donations every Christmas. Now I've grown to count on them. They were from you, weren't they?
Yes.
Well, we have put them to very good use.
I may not have had the privilege of knowing your father, but I'm looking forward to getting to know Edward's grandson.
Well, obviously, we still have a lot to learn about one another, Miss Quartermaine.
Well, to begin with, I prefer to be called Lila, if you don't mind. Well, I think it's time to ask the rest of the family to join us, if that's agreeable.
Yes, it is.
Will you excuse me?